This is Gums and Gossip. She's the dental educator behind the mask and the hygienist with a lot of heart, ready to share her advice, her stories, and her special guests from the other side of the dental chair. And now, here's your host, Hope Loyd.
Welcome, everybody, to Gums and Gossip podcast. My name is Hope. I am your Gum Goddess podcaster, and I have a special guest. This is the first episode of season 6, and I have meet Dr. Odessey Jankovic, an American-Israeli entrepreneur, educator, and advocate with a background in education leadership. Her top-ranked podcast, Inspired by Purpose, offers actionable guidance from entrepreneurs and thought leaders. She provides strategic business and marketing solutions, and her book, Beyond All Things, blends timeless wisdom with timely research, guiding a spiritual journey towards joy, purpose, and connection. Dr. Odessey holds a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Southern California, as well as a master's in administration and a bachelor's in sociology. She has a proven track record leading programs and symposiums, guiding purpose-driven entrepreneurs, and being a voice for change in the spaces of mental health, spirituality, and activism. So welcome. I am super excited, Dr. Odessey, to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So she has blessed me with her presence from Israel. So I am in McKinney, Texas, and she is in Israel. And I would love to hear a little bit about, if you can kind of introduce a little bit about yourself, and then we can maybe talk some questions about Israel and the happenings and kind of thoughts about things that my audience would love to hear.
Absolutely. Well, I so appreciate your having me. Actually, my husband's from Texas, so I've been there a few times. And we have a strong Texas connection. So I myself am from Southern California, and I was the only Jewish kid in my class growing up. And people used to tell me, well, you don't look Jewish, you're blonde and you're, blue-eyed. And, it was always interesting. I always knew I was like a little bit different. And as my life went on and I learned more about my heritage, I became very attracted to Israel, which is the only democracy in the Middle East. And it is the only place on earth where I am no longer a minority, although we are 0.2% of the world's population. Here where I live in Israel, I don't feel that way, on a day-to-day basis. So life in Israel, in a lot of ways reminds me of Southern California. We have the sunny weather and the beautiful beaches and friendly people, a lot of diversity, and it's a great place to be. So that's a little bit about me and my journey.
I love that. So what brought you? Can you share some specific experiences or moments that stood out to you since you moved to Israel, particularly? So enlighten everybody, you moved to Israel in what year?
So I moved to Israel in 2015. And at the time I was 35 years old, married. I had 3 kids at that time. We have a 4th now. And I came over from Los Angeles. I just finished my degree. I finished my degree in education leadership. And I thought that I would get involved in Los Angeles in urban education where I was trained. But as the years passed, I realized that I would be more useful here. And so what can I tell you? A lot of people think that that Israel is like a Western country. And in many ways we are in terms of our liberal values. But moving to the Middle East was a really big deal. So I would say the 2 moments that have stuck out most to me moving here, I guess I have 3. When we first came over, and we came for so many different reasons, but I'll always remember when we went to the port to pick up our belongings, we had sent over this big truck from LA to Israel, and we went to go pick it up. And I stopped off for a falafel, which is like this very popular cuisine here in Israel. I took my daughter, who was 10 at the time, and the man behind the falafel counter looked at us and he said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Los Angeles." He says, "Hollywood, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills. Why did you leave?" And it was like this fresh reminder on day one of like, why did I leave? Why did I come here? So that really stood out a lot to me. And I would say that the second moment was having my son when we had our now 6-year-old here in Israel and having that experience of, being in the hospital in Israel. I was there for 2 weeks. He was a preemie, and the hospital in Israel is a place of so much diversity. It's really a microcosm for the coexistence that happens in this country. And it was beautiful to be there and connect with moms of all different backgrounds and really, unite over our common experience. So that was really special. And, recently the tragic events of October 7th have redefined my life. As a mom and as a human being, as an Israeli, as a Jew, and really as a humanitarian. So those would be the three defining moments that come to mind first.
Absolutely. So you're as a mom of 4, I know there were differences. You had some in the States and then you had some in Israel when they were born, with your kids. Was there a big difference with the hospitals, or is it pretty standard care, or did you
Yes,
notice something
it's
different?
it's there are similarities and differences, and I would say my other children were born at Cedar-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, and my fourth was born here at Hadassah in Jerusalem. And the birth room felt similar in many ways. I felt here that the nurses and doctors were very supportive in the birth process itself. They were so excited and, really holding my hand and doing whatever they could to comfort me. And for whatever reason, Hope, after the birth, it was a world of difference. So in LA, you're in your room and they bring you your meals and they, bring you ice and Advil and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Here, it is like you serve yourself. I mean, from the day you have your baby, they want you up and active. So you actually, even after I had a C-section, I had to get up and walk down the hall and pick up my tray and walk through the lunch line. Nobody is doing anything for you. So that
Wow.
was like, and if you want medicine, you have to like prove that you're in pain. There's a certain expectation here of strength that I had never experienced before. And that was different. What can I say?
Yeah, so it's funny hearing you say that, because we do take all those things for granted because everybody is they don't want you up, but then when you're ready to the bill is ready to go, after 2 days or whatever, they're like wanting to kick you out. And so I don't know. That's
Yeah.
to be
Oh,
to
I'll
be
tell
said,
you
but
something. I'll tell you
yeah.
something. You're going to love this. So every mother is entitled to something called a baby hotel after the baby's born. And a baby hotel is a special floor of a hotel that's fully equipped for new mothers. And so you get under the national insurance plan 1 week in the baby hotel. So I got to stay there and they have night nurses. So they take care of your baby at night.
Oh,
And it's just a whole hotel experience for a week. And you get to recoup and recover. And so that was for me. It was like getting out of the hospital. Once I got to the baby hotels, I was feeling better. I had the help, and it was a really nice place. My family got to come visit me. So that was really useful.
it's funny. I know I have 2 kids of my own, and when my son was born, I really didn't understand. When I got him home, I had C-section as well. When I got him home, I didn't realize how draining it was, and I didn't have help. And so here I was nursing him and so exhausted and
Yeah.
thirsty, and there's so many things that go along with motherhood afterwards. And I had to take care of myself pretty much. I mean, I had a husband at the time, but it's nobody really knew anything. It was more of a nuisance, like if somebody was gonna try to help you, it was something that I wasn't really welcoming because, everybody has different views, like how to feed the baby and what to do. And I'm like, I'm nursing him, and they try to still give food or something. So I was like, go away.
It's like a very sensitive time. It can be, right?
Yeah, and so your hormones are raging too, so you're going, "Okay, I don't know," you're a little enlightened, heightened
For
up.
sure. Yeah.
So, given your experience in education, How have you observed the educational landscape involved in Israel? And are there any notable differences or challenges compared to your experiences in the US?
Oh, it's so interesting about the schools. There are so many differences. And I remember in our education school, we were always taught when you're going to a school in a new culture, you want to look for the assets. You want to look for the good points. It's really easy to find the faults, the deficits in something, but you want to look for the good points. And that was my training before I went into my research in the poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles. And so I got really good at looking for those assets. We came over here, and when it's your own children, it becomes that much harder to do that. But I really, really worked at it. And I'll tell you, the first year I was here, I worked in a school and I taught English. And the decorum of the school, Hope, was so different. In the States where I had worked, the kids walk quietly through the hallways to recess and in a line. And here in the elementary school, the kids are the same age. I mean, they're playing games in the hallway. They throw their shoes down the hallway and they see who can run and jump the furthest from them, and all kinds of like wild and crazy. It's like a party in the hallways. So there was this energy that I came across, and something else that was really interesting. In the States and a lot of schools where I had worked, the PTA, like the mothers and the volunteers, or, the fathers, mothers, parents, would take a really active role, say in the carnivals at the school, or the assemblies, or whatever events and activities would happen at the school. Here in Israel, the kids take responsibility for everything. So so if you're the carnival and you're ordering a cotton candy, you have a 10-year-old who's going to make that for you. And it's kids do things here that seem more risky than they would in the States. Like they give young kids like even sharper knives, like to cut their own fruit. There's just a lot of independence that you see in these schools that I always saw an emphasis in the States on safety and, really being careful and doing things for the kids. And here it's really the opposite. It's also a little less organized than what I saw in terms of, I saw a lot of like innovative models in education happening in the States. I think Israel in general is a little bit behind, but I will say that in Israel, they make up for it with youth groups. They make up for it with all kinds of extracurriculars. And there's a lot of responsibility given to the kids. And I think that's really where the real asset is here.
Yeah, I think it's great because as an enabler myself, as a mom, I have had to back away and learn that my kids they're super independent. And I observe others, and I think, man, as a single mom, I pat myself on the back because I think, wow, my kids are pretty cool. They're all independent and off on their
Right.
own and doing their thing. And I did my job, but it's still hard in the back of my mind. You still want to be a mom and do things, you know?
Yeah, I get it. It's a balance. It's like it's such a balance because we've known our kids since they were born, and they're our babies, and yet
There are
it's easy to
hearts.
forget how capable they are, right?
I know. It's like, and then I have to think back when I was their age, because they're 18 and 21, and I have to think back when I was their age, and I was like, I was super independent, so I don't know, but yeah, so then I really have backed away. But so did you know Hebrew before you went to Israel, or did you learn Hebrew, or does most
No,
people speak
Hope,
English?
I knew a tiny bit of Hebrew, I'll tell you. It's funny, growing up in San Diego, there are not a lot of Israelis when I was a teenager. And so I took on this role in my local Hebrew school as a teacher. Now, looking back at that, it's laughable because I barely knew the Hebrew ABCs and their sounds and their pronunciations, but there's a shortage of people who know Hebrew. So I ended up in a position where I was teaching Hebrew. Now, flash forward 20 some odd years and I'm here. I did not know a lick of Hebrew when I came. I mean, I could barely speak in the present tense. My vocabulary was lacking. I can get by now in conversations where I feel comfortable. I can get by in appointments and meetings and day to day. I will not say that my Hebrew is perfect. I don't work generally in Hebrew, and I think that that's really the defining piece. Once somebody starts working in another language, that's when,
Yeah,
that's when the progress
what about
happens.
the kids? Do the kids know? Do they teach them in school and everything? They know
So
it?
it's funny, they didn't actually teach my kids in school because we moved to an Israeli neighborhood. And so
Mm.
they didn't have a lot of services for immigrants, but they were thrown in. And so in certain ways, that was great. We did have to find them support outside of school over time. There are pluses and minuses. If you move to a neighborhood that is full of English speakers, you might get the services, but you're not going to get that practice outside of school, right? Because kids in English speaking neighborhoods, they'll play with each other after school. They'll play with each other at recess. So my kids were speaking straight Hebrew. They were with their friends, their Hebrew speaking friends at school, but they didn't get that formal piece, and it's something we've been working on since.
Wow, I just think it's so amazing when you're into somebody else's culture. I just took a recent trip to Europe. I had never been to Europe before, and I went on a little solo quick journey. And I went to Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, France, and Germany. And so I just hopped a train, and I just was very brave, I guess. I don't know. I didn't think I was that brave, but I was. And the cultural differences just in every country. I haven't been to Israel. I'd love to go to Israel, and
Yeah,
I
come
can't
visit.
visit. um, but it is on my top of list to go. Not right now, but I will. And but because there's so much, I can't wait to even share like some of the experiences I know that you've had too. But anyways, yeah, the cultural differences, like even eye contact and looking at people and having if I smiled, people thought I was too friendly, or there was, they'd back away. And I'm like, I'm from Texas and they don't care.
Texas is great. We always say, when we're in Texas, we go for a walk in the morning. People are waving from down the street. It's awesome.
Yeah, you don't get that in a lot of countries. It's usually they stare at you and go, "What do you want?" So as far as being a multipreneur, and I'd like to get maybe some like insights, and especially from coming in Israel, and challenges, opportunities, things that you've encountered along your journey.
It's interesting in the space of entrepreneurship here because you have a lot of immigrants. And what we know from research in the space of entrepreneurship is that when people are new to a culture, or people are outsiders in some capacity, you import ideas. And so what's really neat about Israel is that people are convening here from dozens of countries around the globe. And so there's a lot of sharing of different ideas, innovating, synthesizing ideas. And there are so many startups in this country. I think we're on par with some of the biggest countries in the world, and we're tiny. We have, 14 million people here. So it's a really, really awesome climate in terms of what's happening in the business space. What else can I tell you?
Yeah. So as far as when you're there, is the cost of living, were you kind of surprised about any of the cost of food or things like that? Did any of that surprise you?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say, when we first came here, I thought it was going to be less expensive in certain ways.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, because of, the healthcare, we have, free healthcare, and schools are also at a very reduced cost, as opposed to private schools in the States. I thought, okay, well, we don't have like state taxes, but the amount of taxes that we pay in this country is so high. And the housing prices have doubled in the 8 years since we've been here.
Wow.
So it is not an easy place to move to financially. You might think from watching the news that people would be like running out of this place, but it's actually the opposite. It is, people are running toward Israel both to visit and to live. And so that definitely surprised me. And then the wages are much lower in most industries. So it doesn't really make sense on paper. I really don't know how a lot of people do it here. There is now wealth, extreme wealth, and there's extreme poverty, and there's everything in between. And, I would say that 20 years ago, even when I lived here for the first time, we didn't have a lot of global chain stores. Like, maybe there was like a McDonald's or two, but now we have all of these, these globally recognized brands. We have, Nike in the mall and Foot Locker. Everything's more expensive because of our tax situation, because of our imports. We don't have trade relationships with a lot of our neighbors. And so everything that comes here in general is coming from far away. We don't manufacture cars. There are several other things we don't manufacture. So the cost of living can be very high. That being said, 20 years ago in Israel, you would never see luxury cars on the road. You'd see like an occasional Lexus. Now it's full of, you name it, like modern cars. Israel's become so modernized in the architecture in so many ways. In the 20 years since I first came here, and it's really a phenomenon. It's
What
really a
about
phenomenon.
what
Yeah.
about the transportation? Because when I was over in Europe, the transportation was a big deal where there were so many, there was trains, there was buses, there was so many different things. Like in Texas, people drive and you can drive forever in Texas. But is there good transportation around, or do most people just take their own cars?
So it's very common for a family to have one car, again, because of the expense. Cars are almost double the price here, and gas is almost double the price as well. So a lot of families choose to have one car. Now, if you're living in like a village, you can't do that. If, both, like if different family members need to drive to work. But I will say that most places have public transit. Our trains are incredible. And I mean, they're clean and they're fast and they're convenient. We have a lot of buses as well. And in Tel Aviv, in the big cities now, those scooters are a big deal. The scooter, like the birds, you can pick up in one place and drop in another. So there's definitely an emphasis on public transportation.
I just, it's fascinating because people, this is going to sound so silly, but years ago, people, you would go to a different place and I'd say, I'm from Texas. And immediately they would say, oh, the horses and that you're on a ranch and you live here and here. People probably have misconceptions about Israel because you don't think it's going to have like the stores like Nike or like something, it's a preconceived notion of what really Israel is, but it's modernized, and that's nice to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's become very, very modern. And it's, you can still go to the desert and go for a camel ride, and you can see still the ancient sites. There's Jewish heritage sites that go back 3,000 years here. So even longer. We have quite a lot of that too. So it's a
Do
big
you
mix.
ever feel unsafe? I mean, that's kind of one of the things too. All these things are happening. We hear things in the news, kind of set things straight a little bit. Is there safety concerns, and especially, being where you're at, is there something that you have to do? Like here we end up practicing different things like for shooters, which is very unfortunate, in the
So unfortunate.
classrooms. Yeah, in the classrooms, it's like I didn't grow up having to do that. We were like tornado shelters or something like that. But they have like different things for emergencies now and protocol. Do you ever feel unsafe for you or your kids, or how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's so unfortunate what's happened in the United States with the school shootings, and it's so unfortunate, this violence that has really swept over the globe, and we are no exception to that. And I'll tell you that over the years I have felt unsafe in many times. I think that we live under an illusion of safety often. Our kids have a lot of freedom, young kids you'll see going to the park by themselves, crossing the street by themselves. From the time they're 9, kids go around with their friends. And it's very common. You don't worry about kidnappings usually. You don't usually worry about kidnappings, or there's not a lot of petty crime either. But everything changed on October 7th here in Israel. And I was walking down the street with my son. We were actually on our way to synagogue. It was a holiday that day. And we never got so far as synagogue because we started hearing missile sirens, and these explosions where, we've had, I think, over 15,000 missiles sent into our country in the last 3 months. And very few of them have landed because we've invested in our defense system. If the missiles had landed, we would be talking about casualties in the hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. So I feel so grateful for the defense system. And there's also the peace, hope. We were walking down the street and hearing these booms, and that's one thing, it throws you off. You think, okay, I better, run into my safe room. We have a safe room in our home where it's made of metal, and you close the door, and if, heaven forfend, a bomb falls on your house, you'll make it. However, this particular time we found out that there was an infiltration into our borders of armed people looking like terrorists, looking like civilians, but terrorists nonetheless, who were doing every possible violent thing you could think of to our citizens. So I started walking home when I heard the booms, and then I was trying to tell myself, Hope, like, okay, stay calm. You're an Israeli. You're strong. You're tough. That's like the persona here.
Yeah.
And then I heard my Israeli neighbors screaming out their window, "What are you doing running around in the street? Run home. You go home." So I ran home, and it was a Saturday. I usually don't check my phone on Saturday. It's a day off. It's a Sabbath. But I turned on my phone and I found out what happened. And we all went into our safe rooms, and we locked all the doors and closed all the windows. And there was actually a risk of people like infiltrating homes. And we found out that our safe rooms actually they don't lock from the inside. So they protect you from missiles, but they don't protect you from physical infiltrations. And people were literally lining up at the stores, like stores of carpenters who could make you these devices that would shut your safe room door. And there were lines out the door for these things. And it was mayhem. People were so scared. And it, in the beginning, a lot of people wanted to leave. They had these emergency flights out. And, I was encouraged to leave by some of my family members. And they said to me, Ozzy, you can always rely on your American citizenship. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, wow, I'm so grateful to be an American, but what about everyone else? I'm an Israeli. And I said to myself, I'm not going anywhere. We're going to do this. We're going to stay here. And I'm going to try to make myself useful. And, right away, there were all kinds of supplies. We had to call up so many reserve members and, of the defense forces. And the army didn't have enough gear for them. So there was no action taken in Gaza. Everyone was around the border for days, planning what to do, really strategizing. Israel's very careful in terms of how they go about defending the country. But in that interim time, I was raising money on Facebook, just running around, buying protein bars for soldiers. Like, we were all doing whatever we could to help. And at the same time, scared, for our own lives in a certain way.
Right. Because it seems so, like I said, your picture is so vivid because it seems so violent. When we see things in the States, obviously we don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. Everything just always looks so violent, and you're in the midst of everything. And it's, to be the calm, you seem like, the calm and the nurturer of everybody, is incredible. So,
well,
yeah.
I don't have children that were kidnapped. I
Yeah.
wasn't kidnapped. I wasn't personally, but I was just on a call with a mother whose 2 teen sons were in captivity for 50 days. And they were subsisting on a quarter of a stale pita every day. And they didn't see sunlight for 50 days. And they were, it's like, it's the Holocaust. It's the
Yeah,
Holocaust.
that's what I was thinking.
And
Yeah.
I know that on the news, and I don't know what you're seeing, but I know that there's a huge focus on demonizing Israel.
Mhm.
And I too feel really, really heartbroken when I see the loss of any innocent lives. I'm a humanitarian, but I
Mhm.
think that one thing we all have to do is consider a source anytime we're seeing something. There are a lot of humanitarian organizations out there which unfortunately want to attack the only democracy in the Middle East when the human rights abuses around us are millions of times. I mean, we could get into all of that. But I just think it's so important that you're open to having conversations and really speaking to people about daily life and what it's like. And in some ways, Hope, you and I probably have certain similar experiences. We go to the grocery store,
Mhm.
and we drive around our town, and we go about normal life in many different ways. We still have movie theaters, they're open. We have cafes, and you might look around and see a lot of normal looking life happening as well.
Yeah. And I think as far as the human connection, I believe you meet people for reasons. And there's
Yeah.
this human connection that draws everyone. I actually met you through social media. And
Yeah.
so the world of social media, there's lots of goods, there's lots of bad things with it. But the most part, I have found so many positive energy people that have been even with the podcast this season. I'm going to be highlighting different countries. And so Israel, and through social media, it piqued my interest because I thought, wow, you are so genuine, you're so kind. And
Yeah.
it portrayed even in the social media world. So I really do appreciate you being on here. So,
Well,
yeah.
it's really a pleasure to meet you and so great to connect.
Tell me, we'll kind of start winding things down. I want to talk a little bit about the dental experiences in Israel because California and Texas, I know there's a lot of cosmetic. I'm sure there's other places too, but there's a big cosmetic trend of making sure everything is there trends in Israel? Are there experiences that you had with the dentist when you got there? I know people don't, and when I was interviewing a couple of people in like in Switzerland and Austria and all that, they just don't see the dentist, and people automatically do
Hmm.
this. So tell me a little bit about culture and dentistry in Israel.
Oh, that's funny. We do have socialized medicine here, but I will say the first thing people go private for here is to go to the dentist. You have a lot of people that will go to the socialized, the clinics that we have. Um, and I pick and choose. I think that you can get a lot of good services there. You can go for a checkup or x-rays, but if I have to get anything done that requires a specialist or a second opinion, I always go out. And I would say a lot of people do if they can, because for whatever reason, the dental system has not necessarily caught up with other medical industries here. There are a lot of dentists who come from other countries that are not trained the way that we're used to in the West. But it's improving. It's improved a lot over the years. And I think in general, we have less focus on aesthetics. Um, it's not to say that it doesn't exist. Like, I have some friends who have veneers or they get their teeth whitened.
Mhm.
But in general, I find people just really focused on, work and living their lives
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we think, I mean, since I've been a hygienist almost 30 years, and so the after COVID times, it seemed a little more clarity of how medical and dental integrate and how just the gums and the health of your body and how we can detect things. I practice dentistry a lot different now that than I did before. I mean, people see us just as tooth cleaners, and we're not. It's a whole world of everything. So there's a lot of wellness and healthcare that goes with it. And so, does Israel end up? Is it kind of where you just go to see the dentist if there's a problem, or is it something that they do prevention?
yeah, absolutely prevention. So you're supposed to go twice a year, which is, I think, the same as in the States
I
for,
didn't. Yeah,
yeah.
with their insurance and everything else. I find it fascinating, like with the healthcare and the insurance. You were kind of touching base on that a little bit, and here healthcare is so expensive. And that was something when I was out of the country, they said, oh, people were like, we'd never move to the US because your healthcare is just so expensive.
Yeah.
And in other countries, if you have a problem, unless you pay private and things like that, it's a big cost difference, I would think.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a big cost difference. I wouldn't say it's prohibitive. It's probably less expensive to go to the dentist here than it is there.
Yeah. Well, you have a great smile too, so
Thank
I think
you.
it's beautiful, yes.
Thank you. I got lucky. I never had braces. So I don't
Wow.
know how I got so fortunate. I know it's pretty uncommon, but what can I say?
Yeah. People tend to think, that Israel is, not I'm trying to figure out the wording of what to say, but, as far as the technology and things like that, we feel like, "Oh, the US must have, like, more of this or more of that," but I think Israel, in any countries, it's not like you're in a dirty environment or anything like that. It's very much, it's a clean country. Yeah?
So, I mean, listen, it's a new country. It's
Yeah.
75. The modern state of Israel is 75 years old. The Jewish connection to the land goes back thousands of years, but the modern country is 75 years old. And it's in the Middle East. And like I said, we don't have trade relationships with our neighbors. We have more now,
Mhm.
thanks to the Abraham Accords and so forth. But in any case, yes, you have access to first world healthcare. They put the focus on things that matter, like in the hospitals when you're having your baby, like you can see. Or for example, I had an eye surgery. I went to an excellent specialist, and he was just start to finish such a phenomenal doctor, and yet he makes a fraction of the salary that he would make in the States, but he does it anyways because he loves living here. And that element, like the cleanliness and the care, are a huge focus. That being said, like in the maternity ward, okay, they would like run out of hand towels, or they didn't have ice, or there are certain things that you notice when you come from the West, but fortunately it's usually not the things that matter that
Mhm.
much.
Absolutely. What is your favorite place to go? I don't you said you mentioned about a camel. Have you ridden a camel?
I don't think that I got on the camel. um I love the Lake Kinneret in the Sea of Galilee in the north. I know that also has a lot of significance in the Christian religion. And it's so beautiful up there. It's sunny, and whenever we visit, there's these gorgeous mountains and hills all around it that are so magical, and orchards, and hiking trails and rivers where you can go tubing and rafting, and it's so magical up there. So that's one of my favorite places. And then of course the coast, the Mediterranean Sea, just
Mhm.
about a 20-minute drive from here, is stunning, clear blue water, warm water. I love it.
Do you cook? I don't like cooking at all. Do you cook? Do you cook differently now?
I've learned some cool new recipes, so I'll give you a couple of my favorites.
Okay.
There's a popular dish here called shakshuka. And shakshuka is usually like a red sauce. So it's like tomatoes, onions, garlic, peppers with like a tomato paste, almost like a marinara, but sometimes you make it spicy, herbs and spices, and then you drop eggs inside and cook the eggs in a pot. So that's one of my favorite things to make. So shakshuka is a big one. And a lot of people eat like a savory breakfast. So salads. If you go to an Israeli hotel, it'll be a buffet of like all different salads, all different cheeses, a variety of different breads. So people are very into this savory breakfast. And let's see, what else do I cook that I can tell you about? A lot of spices. That's the number one thing. My 15-year-old daughter has a lot of friends who are from here for generations, or they come from the surrounding Middle Eastern countries. And they use a lot of spices. And so she taught me how to spice my food.
Just seasoning, season, right?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of turmeric and cumin and paprika. And spicy paprika.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. I'm such a foodie, but like I said, I don't really I don't enjoy cooking, but I like to eat.
Yeah. Well, when you come here, you can come by for some shakshuka.
Absolutely, that sounds great. Um,
Awesome.
is there anything else that you'd like everybody to know? I'm gonna wrap this up, and where can we find you? Tell a little bit about,
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I think that the number one thing I want to share with people right now is that I do a lot of different things. I do Israel-based video production, and I've actually stopped consulting for entrepreneurs recently because I'm so focused on PR about what's actually happening here and
Mhm.
finding people in the space of social media and online who are committed to promoting humanitarian values in a way that is not selective, in a way that really appreciates humans from all backgrounds and and Israelis and Jews, because we are seeing unprecedented amounts of anti-Semitism, and I truly believe it is because of disinformation. There's a whole lot happening behind the scenes, especially in the West. I could get into the details, but what I want to say above anything else is what you're doing is so important. Reaching out across borders,
Mhm.
across the continents, and just having conversations with real people. And I think, Hope, if everyone would do exactly that, I think we would see a lot more harmony and a lot more love and a lot more humanitarianism in the world.
I live by my name. I say hope as in I embody my name, and I definitely appreciate you being on the show. I think it really helps people understand just a brief view of kind of what's the inside of Israel. I know there's a lot more and there's a lot more details. So, where else can they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best place right now would be on Instagram. So I'm dr.ozzy.jankovic. And I'm also running a new campaign called Humanity POV. And Humanity POV is definitely going to give you some fresh perspective, human stories on Instagram. We have a lot to see there. We have a podcast coming out. And that's really my main focus right now, in addition to all the video production we do on the ground. Just getting the right messages out there, getting the truth out there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know it's
Thank you,
probably
Hope.
later there in Israel, so
Yeah.
you're winding down, and so I do value your time, and I really appreciate you. Thank you for being on Gums and Gossip.
Hope, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Gums and Gossip and your host, Hope Loyd. If you liked what you heard, help us spread the word by leaving a review wherever you get your podcast. And tell a friend. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And we'll see you again next time.